Hello guys, today I'm going to do a video on Forspoken with the RTX 3060 Ti. We're starting it off at 1080p, the high preset. Alright, here we are with the high preset. No DLSS, no FSR, and RT is disabled as well. I think the high preset should be the more realistic option for this card, but if it runs bad then I'll bring it down to standard, and hopefully we can achieve 60 FPS at least in each of our presets except for 4K. Alright. Let's jump into it. Okay, so already at 1080p with the high preset, we are getting 52 FPS and falling into the 40s. So honestly about the same as the 3080 at the ultra settings with RT enabled. This area is very intensive with all the foliage around, so FPS will be lower than normal. So once we leave this area, FPS should go up into the 60s is what I'm guessing. But already at 50 FPS, it doesn't feel laggy or anything. It feels fine. There's no like input lag that I can feel, and there's no stuttering either. So okay, 40 FPS doesn't feel the best, but 50 FPS to 60 FPS feels just fine in my opinion. Like I was saying before, once we leave that area with all the foliage, FPS should go up into the 60s, and it does. We're sitting in the mid 60s now, which is quite good. And I already mentioned this in the other two previous videos that I did in this game, but the ultra settings is very intensive for no reason at all. Quality is very similar to the high preset, but your FPS will be far worse. So playing with the high preset here is fine. The game looks good, I guess, for the most part, and performance is decent. And using DLSS at the balanced preset, look at that, be sitting in the 70s/ the 80s now. VRAM is already like 6.3 gigs, so we only have like, I guess, a gig and a bit left. As long as we don't push it up to ultra, VRAM shouldn't be a worry. Now I want to go back to that starting area with this preset with DLSS enabled and see if we can hold 60 FPS there, because that area again is very intensive, and if we can hold 60 FPS there, then hopefully we should be fine throughout the game. Now it's only the first day of release, so I've only had a couple of hours of experience in this game, so there could be areas that are far more intensive than this. That's why I'm giving you guys some headroom in case that happens. We're getting 70 FPS. The game does look a bit blurry now in the distance. I don't really like the look, and if I zoom in you guys can probably see it better. But you can definitely tell that there's a lot of quality lost with using DLSS. But FPS is sitting in the 70s instead of sitting in the 50s and 40s. I guess on average we're sitting in the 50s, but still. Yeah, this should give us a stable 60 FPS experience for the most part. Maybe there'll be some areas where we will fall into the 50s still, but I think this should be enough headroom where we don't fall into the 50s and 40s. And playing the game at 440p with the high preset, no DLSS and no RT obviously, getting 40 FPS, which is a decent start. Should give us enough headroom to hopefully get 60 FPS with DLSS, or maybe 50 FPS on average with DLSS. Getting into combat, we're falling into the 30s now. With the controller, it will probably feel far better, but again on the keyboard and mouse at 30 FPS, it doesn't really control well. It's kind of crazy how a year ago, this card was pretty much a 440p card. It was a bit overkill at 1080p, it was still really good obviously, but it was going on the edge of being overkill, but now at 1080p it is struggling to get 60 FPS, and at 440p it is sitting at 40 FPS. And this is not at max settings, this is the high preset, and I did test out the medium settings as well, but the FPS wasn't really consistent, so I'm gonna keep it out. We gained around 5 to 10 FPS in some areas, and then we lost more in others. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and enable DLSS now. The game should look just as good as native, and FPS hopefully is gonna be sitting in the 50s and 60s. Now with balanced DLSS, we're sitting in the mid 60s. So we went from what, the low 40s, even the mid 30s, up to the low 60s. And obviously this won't be a stable 60, as you can see we're falling into the mid 50s right now. And jumping into combat, we should maybe see a bigger drop, but let's see in a second. Come over here and shoot these guys. Yeah, dropping into the low 50s. Ooh, on the edge of 50 right now. I almost fell into the 40s again, but not quite. So it's a decent boost, and the quality looks fantastic still, looks very close to native 440p. At 1080p I wouldn't use DLSS personally, but at 440p it's definitely usable, and you can go up to balance. I don't like performance mode at 440p, but at 4K you can use that as well. So FPS did boost up into the, I guess, mid 70s for a little bit, but during the boss fight it is back down into the low 60s and even the mid 50s. So I think that's what you're going to be expecting with the balanced DLSS mode at 440p. The game looks fantastic anyway, and 50 FPS to 60 FPS feels amazing regardless. The game's not stuttering either, so it's perfectly smooth, and in my opinion this is the ideal way to play the game at 440p. You can play the game at medium settings as well and gain a bit more performance, but for me personally, the FPS has been very inconsistent, so I can't really recommend anything there. Let's go to move on to 4K. I'm going to be sticking to medium settings for that. I don't want to be pushing our luck too far by going up to the high settings. The game has already been crashing for me a bunch of times, and I don't want to risk anything. So yeah, let's go up to 4K, medium settings, no DLSS, and see what we can get. Alright, here we are at 4K with the medium settings. Here I'm sitting at 7 gigs, so we're very close to our limit. I'm pretty sure in the game settings, it tells us that we only have 7 gigs. Look at that. Yeah, we've gone over the limit actually, and it's still climbing up. 7.3 gigs out of 7 gigs. But yeah, it should be fine. The card has 8 gigs, so I think we have some headroom left over still. FPS is honestly quite high for 4K. I was expecting us to be sitting in the 30s, or like even the 20s at times, but 40 FPS is not that bad. Let me just double check if DLSS is enabled. This seems like we're running DLSS. Okay, that makes sense. It's enabled FSR, and I couldn't tell. Yeah, the quality for sure looks very good, but I don't know why I decided to enable FSR by itself. There we go, 16 FPS. Much more realistic and what I was expecting, to be honest. So with the 3080, I was getting around 27 FPS at 4K Ultra settings with RT enabled. This card can do the same at the medium settings. Feels super laggy at this point, 16 FPS there for a second. Super laggy. But as we saw before, with FSR or DLSS, we can get 40 FPS. So I'm going to go ahead and enable DLSS now. And as you can see, the quality looks pretty much unchanged with performance DLSS compared to native 4K. And FPS is sitting in the mid 40s up to the low 50s, which is quite incredible. So at 4K, this game is playable with this card. But I think ideally, I would stick to 1080p or 1440p. At 1080p, I would stick to the medium to high settings, no DLSS. And at 1440p, I would go with a mix of medium to high settings with DLSS set to balanced. At 4K, 60 FPS is going to be very hard to hit, so the goal is 30 to 40 FPS, and with that, I'm going to be using performance DLSS at the medium settings. Alright, that's pretty much it guys. Thank you guys for watching, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time for Dead Space. See you guys there.